Hit subscribe. Because what you're about to see isn't a Hollywood script. The first sound isn't a voice. It's metal. At 4:30 a.m., deep in the Colorado high desert, the concrete corridors of ADX Florence hum with the echo of steel boots and clanking cartwheels. The air smells sterile, industrial cleaner, old cement, and something faintly sour that lingers from yesterday's meals. In a place built to hold the most dangerous inmates in the federal system, even breakfast carries tension. The lights never really turn off here. They dim. They soften. But darkness doesn't exist the way it does outside those razor wire fences. Inmate cells are concrete boxes, 7 by 12 feet, with poured concrete beds, a small desk, a toilet sink combination, and a narrow slit window angled toward nothing but sky. No horizon. No mountains. Just a slice of blue. Inside one of those cells sits Daniel Mercer, 46 years old, former financial consultant turned federal inmate, convicted in a sweeping fraud case that unraveled pension funds across 3 states. No violence in his file, just numbers, signatures, and lies that cost people their savings. But ADX doesn't just house bombers and cartel leaders. It houses men the Bureau of Prisons classifies as management problems. Mercer, despite his white-collar crime, had a reputation for filing grievances, challenging policies, and organizing complaints. At 4:45 a.m., a correctional officer stops outside his cell. Stand clear of the door. The command is routine, robotic. Mercer steps back. A metal tray slides through the narrow food slot at the base of the door. Breakfast. 2 scoops of powdered scrambled eggs. A scoop of instant grits, pale and thick. 1 small carton of milk. 2 slices of white bread. No seasoning packets today. The tray hits the concrete with a dull thud. Mercer kneels, staring at it. In most prisons, food might be an inconvenience. At ADX, it's currency. It's morale. It's the only variation in a day that otherwise dissolves into monotony. Across the tier, 3 cells down, inmate Raul Mendoza pounds once on his door. Not hard enough to trigger a report, just enough to signal dissatisfaction. Mendoza isn't here for fraud. He's serving life for orchestrating violence tied to a cross-border drug network. His temper is documented. His isolation status is strict. The pounding stops. A guard's boots pause outside his door. Silence stretches. Then the cart continues moving. At 5:10 a.m., the entire range is quiet again. Men eat alone. Plastic spoons scrape metal trays. Milk cartons crinkle. In isolation units, meals are delivered without conversation. No communal cafeteria. No chatter. Just the sound of chewing in concrete boxes. But this morning feels different. At 6:02 a.m., an alarm pierces the corridor. Chirp. Sudden. Mechanical. A red light flashes above the control panel at the end of the tier. Medical alert. Cell 117. That's Mercer. 2 officers rush down the walkway. A 3rd radio's central control. Inside the cell, Mercer lies on the floor beside his tray. The milk carton is crushed under his shoulder. The eggs are untouched. His face is pale. His breathing shallow. The officers unlock the outer gate, then the inner door. Procedures are tight. Every movement calculated. Mercer, can you hear me? His eyes flutter. He tries to speak but coughs instead. Medical staff arrive within minutes. Blood pressure low. Pulse irregular. They lift him onto a stretcher. And as they carry him out, one detail doesn't go unnoticed. The grits. They're darker than usual. Clumped differently. The nurse pauses. Bag the tray, she says. The corridor goes still again, but this time the silence is heavy. By 7 a.m., the breakfast carts are gone. Cells are sealed. Inmates are on lockdown pending investigation. At ADX, food incidents aren't common. Everything is measured, logged, controlled. Ingredients arrive sealed. Portions standardized. Trays assembled under supervision. So what happened in cell 117? Warden Elise Harper is notified before 7:30 a.m. Harper is methodical, known for balancing strict control with procedural precision. She doesn't jump to conclusions. But she understands optics. A potential food contamination inside the most secure federal prison in America isn't just a health issue, it's a national headline waiting to explode. She orders immediate review of kitchen footage. The prison kitchen at ADX is a controlled environment. Inmates assigned to food service are screened extensively. Movements tracked. Cameras positioned above prep tables. Breakfast prep began at 3:15 a.m. Powdered eggs rehydrated in industrial mixers. Grits stirred in massive steel kettles. Milk cartons counted and logged. At 3:47 a.m., the camera catches something small. A brief pause at kettle 2. Inmate kitchen worker Thomas Keene adjusts the ladle. He looks over his shoulder. Twice. Then continues stirring. It's subtle. Almost nothing. But Harper sees it. Zoom in, she tells the technician. The footage sharpens. Keene's left hand dips toward his apron pocket. It's quick. Concealed by the kettle's rim. Then the stirring resumes. What's in his file? Harper asks. Keene is serving 20 years for conspiracy tied to organized cybercrime. Nonviolent. Model behavior for 5 years. Assigned kitchen duty 6 months ago. No recent infractions. Still, protocol demands action. Keene is removed from his work detail by mid-morning. Placed in administrative segregation. Meanwhile, Mercer is stabilized in the prison's medical unit. Toxicology tests are initiated. Blood samples drawn. Rumors spread fast in isolation units, even without direct communication. Inmates tap coded messages through pipes. They shout during the brief moments doors open for showers. Foods tainted. Kitchen workers' retaliation. Administration experiment. By noon, the entire facility is in restricted movement. Lunch is delayed. When trays finally roll out at 1:30 p.m., they are different. Cold sack meals. Peanut butter packets. Jelly. 2 slices of bread. An apple. A sealed bottle of water. No hot food. No grits. In cell 122, Mendoza smirks as he inspects his apple. See, he mutters to himself. Told you. Back in her office, Harper reviews Keene's interrogation transcript. He denies everything. I stirred the kettle. That's it. I didn't add anything. Why would I? I don't even know Mercer. But investigators uncover something else. 3 weeks earlier, Mercer filed a grievance, not against kitchen staff, but against prison procurement. He alleged substandard food quality, mislabeling of expiration dates, and cost-cutting measures that reduced nutritional value below federal guidelines. He cited internal memos. Memos that weren't public. How did he get them? And why would someone risk contaminating food over paperwork? At 4:15 p.m., toxicology results return. No poison. No foreign chemical agents. But elevated sodium levels. Extremely elevated. The grits sample shows an abnormally high concentration of salt, nearly 5 times standard measurement. Not enough to be lethal to a healthy adult. But Mercer has hypertension. Documented. The question shifts. Was it sabotage? Or negligence? Harper calls an emergency meeting. Food service supervisors insist recipes are automated. Pre-measured packets. Controlled seasoning. Unless someone added salt manually. She replays the footage again. Keene's hand in his apron pocket. What was in that pocket? A search of his cell reveals nothing unusual. But inside the laundry area near the kitchen, officers discover an empty industrial salt pouch tucked behind a dryer vent. Unlogged. Unaccounted for. That pouch shouldn't exist. At 6 p.m., dinner is canceled. Facility-wide lockdown is extended. Inmates remain sealed in concrete boxes as investigators comb through supply logs. One number doesn't match. Inventory shows 1 extra bulk salt shipment delivered 2 months ago. No documentation explaining why. Mercer lies in the medical unit, conscious now, but weak. A federal investigator sits beside his bed. Did you argue with anyone in the kitchen? Mercer shakes his head. I argued with administration. About the food budget. I told them cutting corners would get someone hurt. He swallows. Guess I was right. The investigator leans forward. Who gave you those memos? Mercer hesitates, then whispers one name. Not Keen. Not a kitchen worker. A staff member. A procurement officer assigned to oversee food contracts. Someone with access to supply shipments. Someone who could manipulate orders. Someone who might want a whistleblower silenced. Back in the administrative wing, Harper's phone rings. It's central office in Washington. They've reviewed preliminary reports. And they're asking a different question entirely. What if this wasn't about Mercer at all? Harper goes still. What do you mean? What if the salt wasn't meant for him, but for someone else on that tier? There are 3 inmates with severe heart conditions housed within 6 cells of Mercer. One of them is Mendoza. And Mendoza has enemies, inside and outside the prison walls. Harper looks at the tier assignment roster. And for the first time that day, the possibility hits her. The trays are assembled sequentially. If the salt was added randomly, then Mercer might have eaten someone else's intended meal. She closes the file slowly. Because if that's true, then someone inside ADX Florence tried to orchestrate an attack using nothing more than breakfast. And they almost succeeded. But when investigators cross-reference the tray numbering system against cell deliveries, they discover something that changes everything. Mercer's tray wasn't random. It was deliberately swapped. And the person who authorized that last-minute tray reassignment wasn't an inmate. It was a staff supervisor. And when they opened the locked procurement office to review contract records, what they found inside tied the food budget cuts, the extra salt shipment, and Mercer's grievance together in a way no one inside ADX was prepared for. The procurement office at ADX Florence is not built like the rest of the prison. It isn't concrete and steel. It has carpet, filing cabinets, a framed certificate from the Bureau of Prisons hanging slightly crooked on a pale gray wall. It smells faintly of stale coffee instead of disinfectant. At 7:40 p.m., Warden Elise Harper stands in the doorway while 2 internal investigators sift through drawers that should have been locked tighter than any cell in the facility. On the desk sits a half-finished mug of coffee. Still warm. Procurement Supervisor Alan Richter was supposed to be off shift by 5 p.m. He never clocked out. His vehicle's still in the staff lot, an officer says quietly. Harper nods. Check the exterior cameras. Inside the top drawer of Richter's desk, beneath a stack of routine invoices, they find something that doesn't belong there. A flash drive. Unlabeled. Harper doesn't touch it. Evidence bag. But time stamped. Meanwhile, lockdown continues across the compound. Dinner remains suspended. Inmates pace inside their concrete boxes, tension tightening like a coiled wire. Word has already spread that Mercer's tray was deliberately reassigned. In a place where routine equals survival, that kind of manipulation feels like betrayal. At 8:12 p.m., the flash drive is loaded onto a secure terminal in the administrative conference room. Folders populate the screen. Vendor underscores. Supplemental understatements. Revised underscore. And one file labeled simply, Adjustments. Harper folds her arms. Open it. The spreadsheet that fills the screen isn't messy. It's precise. Meticulous. Dates aligned. Quantities listed. Shipment codes highlighted. And then they see it. Salt, bulk industrial, 50-pound bags. Ordered once per quarter under standard guidelines. Except for 2 additional shipments over the past 8 weeks. Unreported. Unbudgeted. And approved with Richter's digital signature. Why would a high-security federal prison need triple its salt allocation? One investigator murmurs. Harper doesn't answer. She scrolls. The Adjustments tab reveals something even worse. Budget reallocation entries. Funds diverted from fresh produce and protein contracts into shelf-stable enhancements. Which, in plain terms, means cheaper food with heavier sodium and preservatives. Mercer's grievance makes sense now. He wasn't exaggerating. He was documenting. At 8:45 p.m., external perimeter cameras flag unusual movement near the maintenance corridor that connects administrative offices to the loading bay. Security zooms in. A figure in a staff uniform walks briskly toward the exit door. Hat low. Shoulders hunched. Enhance that, Harper orders. The image sharpens. It's Richter. He swipes his badge. The door doesn't open, because during lockdown, external exits require dual authorization. He tries again. Nothing. Then he looks directly up at the camera. For a split second, his expression isn't panic. It's calculation. By 9 p.m., Richter is in custody inside the administrative holding room. No cuffs yet. Just 2 officers flanking him. Harper sits across from him at a steel table. "You forgot to clock out," she says calmly. He forces a tight smile. Long day. 2 extra salt shipments. Budget diversions. A tray reassignment that nearly put an inmate into cardiac arrest. His jaw tightens. That wasn't an attempt on anyone's life. Oh. Harper leans forward. Then explain it. Richter exhales slowly, as if he's been rehearsing. You think Mercer was exposing corruption? He wasn't. He was threatening litigation. Massive litigation. Class action. Federal audit. Do you know what that does to a facility like this? To funding. You're telling me you spiked a meal to protect your budget? I didn't spike anything, he snaps. Salt levels fluctuate. Kitchen staff mismeasure. It happens. Not 5 times standard measurement. Silence hangs between them. Finally, Richter speaks again, quieter now. You ever tried running this place on the budget Washington gives us? Every quarter they cut. Every quarter they demand more compliance. More documentation. Less cost. He looks directly at her. So we stretch supplies. We reclassify shipments. We make it work. And Mercer? He wouldn't stop digging. He filed grievance after grievance. He got hold of internal cost sheets. He was building a case. Harper's voice hardens. So you reassigned his tray. Richter's eyes flicker. It was supposed to be a scare. Elevated sodium causes discomfort. Dizziness. Maybe a short medical stay. Enough to make him rethink poking the bear. The room goes very still. You gambled with a human life, Harper says. He's alive. For now. Outside the interrogation room, another officer rushes down the hallway. Ma'am. Harper steps out. There's another incident. Her stomach tightens. Where? Medical unit. Inmate Mendoza. Inside the medical wing, Raul Mendoza lies on a gurney, restrained but conscious. His heart monitor beeps erratically. What happened? Harper demands. Dinner sack meal, the nurse explains. He complained of chest pain 15 minutes after eating. But dinner was cold food, Harper says. No hot prep. The nurse nods. We tested his apple. Elevated sodium content. Harper's mind races. The apples were sealed shipments. Pre-washed. Individually distributed. Bus. Pull the delivery logs, she orders. Check who handled produce today. Back in procurement records, investigators discover something chilling. The apple shipment arrived 3 days ago. Stored in cold storage. Signed off by Richter personally. But surveillance footage from earlier that afternoon shows someone entering the storage room after lockdown began. Not Richter. Thomas Keene, the kitchen worker already in segregation. Harper feels the ground shift beneath her. Keene was under watch. Restricted movement. How did he access storage? They review corridor footage. At 12:17 p.m., during lunch delay chaos, a staff member badges Keene through an interior checkpoint. The badge belongs to Assistant Food Supervisor Linda Carver. Carver has worked at ADX for 12 years. No disciplinary record. Known for strict adherence to procedure. Harper finds Carver in her office, hands trembling as officers escort her to interrogation. I didn't know, Carver insists immediately. Keene told me he needed to retrieve cleaning supplies from storage. You overrode lockdown protocol, Harper says coldly. He said it was urgent. In the medical wing, Mendoza's vitals stabilize. His sodium levels are high, not lethal, but dangerously elevated given his heart condition. 2 inmates. 2 separate meals. Same anomaly. This isn't a scare tactic anymore. It's systematic. At 11:30 p.m., toxicology confirms trace salt contamination on multiple apples from the same crate. But here's the twist. The contamination isn't uniform. Only certain apples show elevated sodium, injected through tiny puncture marks near the stem. Deliberate. Calculated. Not Richter's impulsive budget manipulation. Something else. Harper replays the timeline. Mercer files grievances. Richter diverts funds, orders extra salt. Keene pauses at the kettle. Carver badges Keene into storage. Mendoza eats an apple laced with sodium. Mercer collapses. 2 targets. Different profiles. 1 white-collar whistleblower. 1 organized crime figure with outside enemies. What connects them? Investigators cross-reference communication logs. Inmates at ADX are heavily restricted, but legal calls and monitored mail still exist. Mercer received 3 legal correspondences last month from a private firm in Denver. Mendoza received 1. The same firm. Harper's pulse quickens. She pulls the firm's name. It's a civil rights litigation group specializing in federal prison conditions. Mercer was building a class action case. And Mendoza? Mendoza had agreed to join. If both men testified about food quality and procurement manipulation, the investigation wouldn't just be internal. It would be federal. Richter looks less like the mastermind now, and more like a desperate middleman. But who benefits from silencing both inmates? At 12:05 a.m., an external intelligence alert hits Harper's secure email. Mendoza's former cartel associates recently transferred large sums to shell companies linked to food supply vendors. One of those vendors supplies ADX. The salt shipments didn't just protect a budget. They masked something larger. A financial pipeline. Inflated contracts. Overpriced goods. Kickbacks routed through procurement channels. If Mercer exposed the budget irregularities, the audit wouldn't just hit Richter. It would unravel vendor contracts. And those vendors might be connected to people who don't tolerate exposure. Harper returns to Richter's holding room. "You're not the architect," she says quietly. He looks confused. "You're the gatekeeper. The one signing off." His confidence wavers. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You knew the contracts were inflated." Silence. "You thought adding extra salt would silence complaints long enough to keep the books quiet." He swallows. But someone else escalated it. Someone who needed 2 inmates, from opposite worlds, incapacitated before they could testify. Richter's face drains of color. At that moment, alarms erupt again. Not medical. Security. Perimeter breach attempt. All monitors flash to the loading dock exterior. A supply truck, one registered to the same vendor flagged in the contract audit, is idling outside the secured gate. It wasn't scheduled. And inside the cab, security zoom reveals 2 men arguing. One of them holds a phone pressed tight to his ear. The gate remains closed. But the message is clear. Whatever started with a breakfast tray has grown beyond internal corruption. This is external pressure. And as armed officers surround the truck, Harper realizes the food inside ADX Florence isn't just sustenance. It's leverage. It's currency. And someone is willing to risk federal charges, maybe worse, to keep the truth buried. But when officers open the back of the truck expecting contraband, they find something that shifts the entire investigation again. Not weapons. Not stolen goods. Just pallets of produce. And at the center of those pallets, another shipment of salt. And approved, electronically, 2 hours ago. By a staff login that doesn't belong to Richter. It belongs to Warden Elise Harper herself. The loading dock floodlights cut through the Colorado night like interrogation lamps. Warden Elise Harper stares at the tablet in her hand, her own credentials glowing on the screen. Approved, supplemental sodium shipment. Authorized by E. Harper. Timestamp, 10:02 p.m. She was in the interrogation room at 10:02 p.m. With witnesses. With cameras. And yet the system insists she signed off on the shipment that now sits idling beyond the gate. Around her, officers pull the truck drivers from the cab and pin them against the vehicle. They shout protests about paperwork and delivery windows. They insist they were told to expedite the drop. By who? Harper demands. One of the drivers hesitates. Dispatch said the warden authorized it personally. Harper's mind is racing. ADX Florence is designed to be impenetrable, concrete poured into the earth, surveillance layered upon surveillance. But no prison is immune to something quieter than force. Inside the control room, cybersecurity technicians comb through login records. Harper watches as lines of data scroll across the monitor. Her credentials were accessed from an internal terminal. Location, Administrative Office, Sublevel 1. Sublevel 1 is rarely used. Old record storage. Archived procurement files. A forgotten artery beneath the prison. Pull footage, she orders. Cameras in Sublevel 1 flicker to life on screen. At 9:58 p.m., 4 minutes before the shipment was approved, a figure enters the hallway. Face partially obscured by a medical mask. Staff uniform. Confident stride. The badge clipped to the chest catches the light. Assistant Food Supervisor Linda Carver. Harper feels the weight of it settle. Carver claimed ignorance. Claimed she let Keene into storage because he asked for cleaning supplies. But now she's on sublevel footage, using a terminal reserved for procurement overrides. Where is she? Harper asks sharply. An officer answers over radio. Her office is empty. Vehicles still here. A search begins, controlled but urgent. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.